Welcome, time for some art fun. Today we're going to use our art supplies and do a check-in on how far I've gotten in using up my watercolor set, so stick around. I have been working on a personal challenge to use up an entire watercolor set, and I'm personally trying to use up my Regina's watercolor set. It has these adorable little square pans. I don't know if they're half pans or what, but the honey-based watercolors are so rich and juicy and wonderful, and I love using them. And so I wanted to keep using them up and see how far I've gotten and give you a check-in. This was one of the pieces that I made, this little koala bear. And one thing that inspired me here, obviously I'm always inspired by koala bears. I've made a ton of koala bears for this channel and also just in my personal sketchbook without even posting for the channel. They're one of my favorite animals to paint. And blue and green especially, is my favorite color to paint with, blue being a close second. And before diving into this piece, I noticed that my greens and blues, the middle row on the Regina's watercolor palette, were not even hitting pan yet when I started this particular piece. And so I thought, all right, well, let me pick something that has a blue and green heavy theme, and I'll be able to start using those pans up a little bit more, and I'll get an adorable koala in my sketchbook again as a side bonus. So it kind of was a win-win-win-win-win-win-win. So I dove in and used these beautiful turquoise greens and phthalo blue and really enjoyed I think it's called a bokeh background, B-O-K-E-H. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but that sort of blurred background where your eye is focused on the foreground and the background just blends together in beautiful, almost circular patterns. And I really, really, really enjoyed making this piece. Now, one thing I also noticed that I found really interesting when I'm sitting down and using one watercolor palette over and over and over, trying to use it up, which is a first for me. I've never tried to do this before, and I'm certainly not the first YouTuber to try to do this. I follow Miranda Watson, Alkali Creek Art, and she has a challenge to use up her Himi watercolor set, and she does check-ins every once in a while. She's actually doing it really scientifically, more like an experiment, just like she does experiments tracking her use of, the light fastness of different watercolor paints that she gets. And she does her own light fastness tests, and it's really cool how scientific she gets. But she's like tracking how many paintings, how many square inches of paintings is she getting out of the palette. And when she's done with the palette, she'll have how long it took her to use it up, and how many paintings she got out of it. You know, basically what Sarah Burns' studio would call brush mileage coming out of that palette. I'm not being that scientific. I'm just using only this palette anytime I want to paint, with the sole exception of glitter paints, because there's no glitter in this one, and super granulating watercolors, because there's no granulating watercolors at all in this set. And so I will still be using my granulating watercolor set, which is largely made up of Schmincke and a little bit of Daniel Smith, as well as any metallic colors that I have, which are mostly from Grabby, as well as from this solo creator, small batch handmade watercolor creator on Etsy named Emily Grace Palettes. So it's really not scientific at all. It's just anytime I want to make a watercolor painting, I'm picking these up. They are out on my desk, and it makes it really easy to remember to use them anytime I'm in my studio. I don't bring these out and about with me, so if I'm traveling, I don't bring these with me, because this is actually a glass palette, so I only use this palette in my studio. I really, really love this palette, and once these paints are used up, I will refill the metal quarter pan, square half pans, I guess, with other tube watercolor that I have. But I love the palette, and the palette was a big reason I bought this watercolor set. So I want to use it up. And one thing I noticed is how shocking it is to me which colors are getting used the most, because frankly, what I think of as my favorite colors, and if you ask me like, okay, you can only have 3 watercolors, what half pans are you choosing? There is no chance that I would think to myself to pick the colors that are being used up so much, but both of the yellows, the warm yellow and the cool yellow, are really going to be gone first. I mean, they are I haven't just hit pan they are like mostly pan at this point, which you'll see when I do. I know I gave you a little shot of the palette right now at the beginning of the video, but I'll do another close-up and you'll see what I mean. The reds were barely used. I really had to focus on using the reds, and the pinkest red is still the least pan hit of all of them. The black is the second least used, which doesn't actually surprise me. I love ink and I love inking my paintings, and so I'll usually use black ink if I need black, not necessarily black watercolor. I do try to remember to use black mixed with yellow to come up with really interesting greens based on the recommendation of Sandy Hester, but I still end up liking my pre-mixed greens more, and I know that's really unique and rare, and most people like to mix their own greens. I love to mix my own greens, but I also love a good array of pre-mixed greens. So because I had done this dual tape off and I wanted to use more of my greens and blues, like I said in the beginning, I wanted to just do a background without an animal in it and make it look like this little koala baby is looking out into the distance, or what this koala's view would be of the forest. And that's what I was kind of thinking when I did this piece on the left. So it definitely helped me make more progress with the blues and greens. And one thing I will say is I'm thinking of calling this challenge, even though I didn't really make it a formal challenge, like a hashtag challenge, the way that we have the CNS calling challenge that Sketches and Scrubs and I are doing, where we basically are playing a game of art telephone that you're invited to join in and play with us, or the No Box Art Box challenge that Jenna Gets Creative started, or the hashtag, Art Box Takeover that Jude and her pencil started. I haven't thought about making a hashtag for this one, but I got a really interesting comment on a recent video that this particular subscriber of mine is really inspired by the Let's Hit Pan or Hitting Pan hashtag challenges that are really prevalent in the makeup community, because makeup palettes, much like watercolor palettes, can be curated and you can start to collect them and maybe get out of your depth where you can't possibly use them up, and makeup in particular can go bad, so it makes sense that there would be challenges to try to use it up. With this in particular, look how adorable this koala came out. I'm really excited about the final piece, and this page is so adorable. And I decided I do want to call this the hashtag Hit Pan challenge. And this is some of the stuff that I'm doing to use these paints up. Adorable koala, the view the koala has. I needed to use this blue and hit pan on the blue, so I did a whole background of blue. And then I made this adorable little chubby birdie, and I made some boughs for him to sit on, and I surrounded him with this metallic blue paint. And then I also wanted to make that one again and share more of the process with you. So this is just a close-up of this little adorable birdie, and I dove in and made it again. This time I made the background with ink. I was using up a bottle of ink, and I actually did use it up. My Sailor Shikiori Yamadori is now used up, and I loved how this blue background really conveys the fact that this is a nighttime birdie scene, and it really looks to me the way that the sky looks on a beautiful full moon evening when there are a lot of clouds and the light is just peeking between the clouds. So I was using more of my watercolors this time, trying to get more of the reds and pinks going to fill the birdie part, and this also really helped me hit pan on some of the reds and pinks that I hadn't yet hit pan on when I started this little series of paintings in my sketchbook this week. And I really am just taking you along to show you how I'm doing this. How am I using up a whole watercolor palette? Because frankly, if you look at that thing, and I'll give you another close-up in a bit, it is making huge progress. And having watched Miranda's series on trying to use up her Himi palette, I know this is going a lot faster than hers is going, and a lot faster than I really anticipated based on watching her series. I was like, well, this is going to take forever, and it's really not taking forever. And it might be, I think, the nature of these particular watercolors and how shallow the pans are. So because these are honey, they really stick to my brush, and they have a lot of paint when I put the paint down. That's why you see a lot of me kind of using a little tissue to dab things up sometimes when I go too crazy. But also the pans are so shallow. They're wider than a half pan, but more shallow than a half pan. So I think that's giving me that visual satisfaction of making a lot of progress, and I'm really excited to see how quickly I can use these up just for that feeling of accomplishment. But in the meantime, I'm making piece after piece that I really enjoy and really like, and it's giving me a lot of ideas. Having this sort of limited, I know we have those limited palette challenges. This is literally a limited palette, meaning one palette challenge, where I'm trying to use this one palette, and anytime I look around this palette and see, okay, the yellows are good to go, let's get some more pinks in here, let's get some more orange in here, let's get some more blues, some black, some browns, some midnight blue, the Payne's Gray version in here, it's like a midnight blue. It inspires me to make a different piece. Like that koala was inspired by the colors I wanted to use up. These two birds were inspired by the blues and then the reds and oranges that I wanted to use up. So I hope that you participate in this challenge and pick something you want to start hitting pan with, and really celebrating when you do hit pan in a watercolor palette, because it really shows that you're using your supplies, you're getting in there, you're getting in your sketchbook and using what you have, you're not being overly precious, and you can make some adorable things. If you're into adorable things like I am, hello, creating cute art, that's what I'm into, is cute stuff. But I also just wanted to show you some of the other things that I'm using up. This is my cheap sketchbook, and I used up my Amazon Basics Posca dupes in these paintings in this sketchbook, and in a bunch of them, just wanted to use those up. And then this was just using some colored pencil. So I am using other materials up too. I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the things that I do during the week with different projects, and how I am using up my watercolor palette and hidden pan. So I hope you join this challenge and start to celebrate hitting pan in your watercolor palettes, and let us know how it's going in the comments. Please remember to check if you're subscribed, and if you're not subscribed, I would so appreciate it if you would subscribe. It really helps the channel, as does any like or comment that you leave on my videos. Until next time, remember, create something cute.